We start with former FBI Director James Comey pleading not guilty in federal court today. A short time ago, Comey appeared before a federal judge facing a 2-count indictment for obstruction charges and lying to Congress. Comey was indicted last month, just days after President Donald Trump urged Attorney General Pam Bondi to do so in a social media post. Now, back in 2016, Comey ordered a probe into the Trump campaign's connections to Russia. He then became an outspoken critic of the president, that's President Trump, after Trump fired him 8 years ago. Now, Comey also denied authorizing leaked information to the press during a Senate testimony in 2020. Today, his attorney did not ask the court for a speedy trial. A trial date was tentatively set for January 5th of 2026. And we have team coverage of today's hearing, and standing by to help us break down the case right now is CBS News legal contributor Caroline Polisi and CBS News justice correspondent Scott MacFarlane is live outside federal court in Alexandria, Virginia. And Scott, we are going to start with you. Thank you for your time today. Can you take us through today's arraignment?
It was a brief hearing, but a momentous hearing nonetheless. And you had a former FBI director facing a judge, now a federal criminal defendant, pleading not guilty to 2 federal charges. There were some matters of scheduling that took place during this arraignment. They put a trial date on the calendar for January 5th, 2026, but that trial date is as slippery as it gets, in part because the prosecution argued today this is a complicated case, which could involve a review of classified information. James Comey doesn't have a security clearance anymore, nor does his defense attorney. That's going to take some time. But we also heard from the judge here, Michael Nachmanoff, a 2021 appointee to the federal court here in Alexandria, Virginia, expressing skepticism. This is such a complicated case because the Department of Justice has not presented a complicated case. It's a 1.5-page charging document with very little detail. So we'll see what the prosecutors have to provide in the coming days and weeks to get this thing to slow down if they want the case to slow down. One other takeaway from the calendar that's important here. The defense says they're going to be filing their motion to dismiss this case, alleging it's a vindictive prosecution, and they're going to do so by October 20th in relatively short order. They also say they're going to file a motion to disqualify or seek the judge to disqualify the prosecutor in this case, who was just appointed, the new U.S. attorney here, Lindsay Halligan, appointed by the Trump administration after the prior U.S. attorney wouldn't bring this case forward and was ousted. You have a lot of moving parts here, but the theater we expected outside didn't happen. There was talk and reporting earlier from CBS News that there was an effort to get a perp walk, one of those photographed walks of a defendant into this courthouse for James Comey. That did not happen this morning. He was given a private, secure entrance out of the view of cameras.
And Scott, I know there's still a lot of developments in this case, and obviously that date of January 5th, that's a tentative date. But any surprises here that Comey's lawyer did not ask for a speedy trial?
No surprises that everybody involved here wants at least a pause until things become more clear. The defense clearly wants to file some motions to get this case absolutely kicked, just off the docket, off the shelf altogether. And the prosecution has given every indication there's more they want to add in this case. It's such a bare-bones charging document. So little is actually alleged in here. We don't know specifically the false statement James Comey is accused of making. So they may need time to further inform the court. And, oh, by the way, there's a staffing issue here. The U.S. attorney herself, in her first ever role as a prosecutor, is the one in the courtroom arguing this case. That is untraditional for a federal prosecutor, a lead federal prosecutor, to be the only prosecutor on a case. And she just brought in a couple out-of-state federal attorneys to help her, an indication there were fewer available in her own office willing to join her in this controversial case.
All right, Scott MacFarlane live for us today. Thank you so much for your time. Now let's turn to CBS News legal contributor Caroline Polisi. Caroline, thank you for joining us. What is the prosecution facing when it actually comes to proving this case?
Yeah, so they've charged Comey with 2 felony counts, one of making false statements to Congress and a second stemming from that false statement of obstruction of a congressional proceeding. The indictment is pretty thin, so I would expect a lot of pushback from the defense about, it's called a bill of particulars, essentially putting the prosecution to their burden of stating specifically what was said that was a lie and how it was misleading and how he sort of knew that it was misleading. So one of the requirements of proving a false statement is not only that it was false, but that it was intended to mislead. And, the underlying facts here are a little bit murky. The wording is a little bit murky. Remember, it stems from congressional testimony he gave in 2020, referring back to testimony he gave in 2017, and him saying that he stood by that testimony regarding his non-authorization of leaks, essentially. So it may be an uphill battle given all the quirks of this case. That being said, traditionally, these charges are pretty simplistic, which is what the judge noted, which is why we are off to the races in terms of setting a trial date and getting things moving here quickly in the Eastern District of Virginia.
And Caroline, what does this case mean for the DOJ? Critics out there, they've mentioned that it seems like the president is using the Justice Department to go after his enemies. We've actually heard the president talk about James Comey and how he is a bad cop. So he's very vocal about how he does not like Comey. So what exactly does this say?
Yeah, he's vocal about his DOJ, which he refers to as his DOJ, going after his enemies, including people like Adam Schiff, Letitia James, for what he sees as retribution. And, part of the evidence, I would assume, in the Comey case will be them making a motion for selective and vindictive prosecution, which includes tweets like the one he made, calling out Pam Bondi by name. Pam, we need to start getting these individuals, prosecuting these individuals. So that certainly will be a piece of evidence in this case. President Trump is breaking a lot of norms. There's no law against his, telling his DOJ what to pursue. But if it crosses a specific line into selective and/or vindictive prosecution, that could really hurt him in this case.
All right, Caroline Polisi, thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you.